Why facts don't change people's minds. I'm sure we've all been in situations, perhaps during a heated discussion, a debate, an argument, where we've sought to defend a particular point of view by presenting reasonable arguments and facts, and we become frustrated when the other person simply doesn't acknowledge the truth, the validity of our reasoning processes. Of course, in some situations, facts and reason seem more important than in others. If we're discussing things such as politics or religion or what was the best Beatles song, there's likely to be as much opinion and subjective points of view as there are actual facts and reasoning processes at work. So it's not really surprising if someone else is not converted to our point of view. Someone who thinks Hey Jude is the best Beatles song is never going to be convinced that A Day in the Life is actually the best Beatles song, which, of course, we all know is the truth. But there are other situations where the actual truth, the facts, seem abundantly clear. They ought to be clear to everyone, or so it seems to us. Now, one of the best examples of this is those people who believe in a flat earth. They believe that the earth is a flat surface, that the earth is not a sphere. People actually believe this. They actually believe it with complete and utter conviction. They believe it as if their life depends upon it. And no amount of factual information, indeed, no experience that they could ever have, would convince them otherwise than that the earth is flat. I guess it's understandable how they initially come to this conclusion. Look around you, of course the earth's flat, right? It's common sense, it's what we see. Yet you only have to scratch a little teeny weeny bit below the surface of even that to know that it's not true. You can see the curve of the horizon when you're on the ocean. You can see the curve of the earth as its shadow crosses the moon. The ancient Greeks were fully aware simply because if you look a little bit below the fact that the little bit of earth I'm standing on happens to be flat, if you look a little bit beyond that, it is actually quite self-evident that the earth is a sphere. And the Greeks even succeeded in measuring the circumference of the earth with surprising accuracy. So, why is it that an idea which, let's face it, is blatantly ridiculous, namely that the earth is flat, can nevertheless be resistant to all kinds of arguments, to all kinds of factual representations? We generally regard ourselves as the intelligent species on the planet. We consider ourselves rational beings. And yet it seems we're nowhere near as rational, as logical as we like to think. We can hold on to completely irrational beliefs that are completely resistant to all kinds of argumentation. I suspect there are some physiological aspects in this. It's like when we get an earworm, a tune that just won't get out of our brain, or it's like a habit that becomes fixed. There are actually biological processes taking place, neural pathways that are established that enable the continuation of this habit or the continuation of this belief system. And changing those belief systems actually means shifting those neural pathways. And that's a lot of work. It takes a lot of energy, and it's much simpler to allow the pathways to remain as they are and direct the energy along the paths that it travels along. One of the things that happens when we hold a particular belief, however rationally or otherwise we come by that belief, is that we begin to look for other arguments that reinforce our position rather than conflicting arguments that might challenge our position. It's much easier to accept arguments that support our position than it is arguments that are counter to it. In their book, The Enigma of Reason, A New Theory of Human Understanding, Hugo Mercier and Dan Sperber argue that there was little advantage in evolutionary terms in reasoning clearly, while there was a lot to be gained from winning arguments. So, in a primitive social setting, a tribal setting perhaps, it was more advantageous for a person to win an argument than it was for them to be right. They argue that one way to look at science is as a system that corrects for people's natural inclinations. Research suggests that people experience genuine pleasure, a rush of dopamine, when processing information that supports their own beliefs. It feels good to stick to our guns even when we're wrong. As far as Mercier and Sperber are concerned, reasoning is used only in ex post facto rationalizations for actions. So basically, we use reasoning simply to justify a position we already hold and to persuade others to share our point of view. Human beings, they argue, are rationalization machines. There's a lot to think about there and a lot to unpack. First of all, it's obvious that we look for arguments that are going to support our position rather than those that don't. And I think one of the things that has exacerbated this particular characteristic of the human race today is social media. Because social media does exactly the same thing. If you watch a YouTube video of kittens, then it's going to continually present new videos of kittens for you to watch. If you watch videos of Trump supporters being ridiculed, you're going to be bombarded with a whole heap of other videos doing exactly the same thing. On the other hand, if you're a Trump supporter or you believe in certain conspiracy theories and you watch YouTube videos or TikTok videos or whatever it might be, then you're going to be presented with other videos that support your point of view. So social media has become a kind of external validation of the process that we naturally undertake. It reinforces that process. I think today, if you look at the United States, you now have groups of people believing certain things, and these two groups never really interact with each other. They're almost like separate breeding populations. They're kind of evolving away from each other. And while that may at present be figuratively true, it may ultimately also be literally true that these populations simply become separate. They don't even interbreed. And so the opinions that they hold and the reasoning that they maintain becomes part of their heritage, their cultural, and perhaps even ultimately their genetic heritage. Now, different groups will only accept reasons that fit their group's societal requirements. If reason exercises a social function, as Mercier and Sperber hypothesize, then this has become polarized, particularly in American society. And each group only listens to and receives information that supports their own point of view. They don't no longer even interact. If groups do in fact solve problems more efficiently than individuals do, again, as Mercier and Sperber argue, then this is breaking down because the two groups now no longer have input from the alternative point of view. Hopefully, on the wacky side of things, on the Trump conspiracy side of things, their own views are so divided that eventually they will splinter into a whole bunch of independent little groups that hate each other as much as they hate the other side, which of course does happen, historically speaking. In a way, I think that the Mercier-Sperber model is both too optimistic on the one hand and too pessimistic on the other. First of all, I think human beings are capable of excellent reasoning. I think we can actually follow logical arguments. The problem is that there are other factors that intervene. I've spoken of physiological factors, reinforcing factors, the fact that we invest so much in being right, which may also be an inherited characteristic. It's very important for us to be right. It's important in terms of our position in the society to which we belong. But I also think they're a little bit too optimistic about the social power of reasoning. I think that works perhaps when you're able to have a good admixture of different points of view. But when the groups are completely polarized and they're only reinforcing their own positions, then I think the social role of reasoning actually breaks down. We're in a very difficult, a very tricky place at the moment. Social media is reinforcing what I think are the worst aspects of our reasoning abilities, the worst aspects of our tendency to hold on to views way past their use by date. I'm not entirely sure what we do about that. We can't put Humpty Dumpty back together again.